All right, up next we have Adelene Perkins. She is the chairman and CEO of Infinity Pharmaceuticals, and she'll be discussing cancer. Her topic is cancer daring to believe in a cure and why this belief is justified. Welcome, Adelene.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be participating in this terrific symposium on cancer evolution and to share my perspectives on why I believe daring to believe in a cure is justified. Sid Mukherjee aptly described cancer as the emperor of all maladies. And we all know the ravages on society that we see around us with this insidious disease, perhaps best characterized by the fact that in the next hour alone, over 1,000 people in the world will die from cancer. I'd like, therefore, to discuss three questions. Why is cancer such a hard problem? How are we doing in the fight against cancer? And is a cure realistic? Cancer has always been with us. In 2013, the oldest case of cancer was found in the skeleton of a young man who was laid to rest in 1200 BC, 3,200 years ago, with evidence of metastases throughout his body and scarring that showed the movement of cancer throughout his body. Cancer has always been with us because it's a natural consequence of evolution. As multicellular organisms live and grow, its cells are constantly dividing and copying its DNA vast genetic library. And there are 10 to 70 trillion cells in our body that are constantly dividing with the same genetic material, such that every single second we have 4 billion cells dividing, copying the entire genome every time, with, very importantly, misprogrammed and mutated cells as a result. And these are essential to the survival of living organisms. They're the engines of evolution. Without these mutations, we would never have evolved. So every day our bodies are producing thousands of these misprogrammed cells, part of normal metabolic processes. And everyone has these mutations, such that 40% of women by the time they're age 40 have microscopic cancer in their breasts. 50% of men by the time they're 50 have microscopic cancer in their prostate. And 100% of people when they get to the age of 70 have microscopic cancer in their thyroids. The good news is that over time, the body's immune system has developed complex mechanisms to identify and correct many of the glitches such that they never become dangerous. And we sometimes refer to this as cancer without disease. The immune system is so effective because it functions as an ecosystem of cells that work together to keep cancer in check. In healthy immune systems, a network of T cells and NK cells eliminate most of the mutations that are the early precursors of cancer. But the immune correction process is not, nor will it ever be, perfect. And every now and then, a certain combination of mutations give an individual cell too much power, and it begins to evolve independently of the rest of the body. In an evolutionary sense, the cancer cells are doing what they're supposed to do. They mutate, they evolve, they increase in fitness compared to their neighbors, with the objective of out-surviving the better behaved cells of the body. Cancer cells escape attack from the immune system by building their own ecosystem of cancer-friendly cells that dominate. They suppress an immune response and they allow the cancer to grow and to resist the immune system and therapies that are designed to kill the cancer. In this sense, cancer is almost less of a disease and more of a phenomenon, the result of a basic compromise that's fundamental to evolution. The final blow that cancer deals is that because it's an evolutionary process, it typically grows slowly over a long period of time, often below the radar. In many cancers, the cancer is asymptomatic, so by the time it's detected, it's gotten so large and it's growing so fast that it really can't be treated. Lung cancer is a great example of this, as consistently over 50% of lung cancers are diagnosed at stage 3 or 4 by the time of diagnosis. So how are we doing against this Goliath? If we rely on the public literature, it's really hard to tell. You can read that we're losing the war, we have hope against the war, we've got the immune shot to cure it. And it's understandable why there's this uncertainty, because trends in incidence rates are heavily influenced by our ability to detect. As population ages, people are more likely to get cancer. So I'm going to focus, where possible, on the clearest measure of effectiveness on the war of cancer, which is the death rate, or what percent of people with cancer succumb to it in any given year. When I just pull from publicly available sources, we made unequivocal progress. In the 14-year period from 2004 to 2018, the overall cancer death rate in the United States fell by 20%. And this is for a number of reasons. First, prevention. We all know that smoking contributes to lung cancer, and when you look at the reduction in smoking by this blue curve, it's mirrored by a corresponding reduction, just tailing that, in the reduction in death rates. So prevention is a really good way to go. The next is screening and prevention and early detection, and we've seen great progress here as well. Just in the last 20 years with colorectal cancer, since 2000, we've seen a 79% increase in screening and a corresponding reduction in deaths, from 20 to 45%, depending on different age groups. We've also seen this in breast cancer, where in the last 40 years, since 1980, there's been a 40% increase in the percent of patients that are diagnosed with localized cancer as opposed to metastatic cancer. This is really important because women who are diagnosed with breast cancer at stage 0 or stage 1 have a 100% chance of a 5-year survival rate. And as we reduce the number of patients diagnosed at later stages, and with the development of new therapies, we see a reduction in the death rate. Perhaps the poster child for success in fighting cancer is in chronic myelogenous leukemia. Data from back in 1994, there was 10-year survival data that 11% of people lived for 10 years. In 2012, that 10-year survival rate increased to 84%, and that data is now almost 10 years old. So we are soon going to have the next generation that's building on data. Even in 2019, we saw that the next generation of targeted therapies have already shown a significant increase in 10-year survival, such that when you look at the prevalence of CML, it's growing rapidly because people are beginning to live with CML as a chronic condition. So the successes in the prevention and the detection of cancer are further enhanced by therapeutic advances. In the last 20 years, over 80 targeted therapies have been approved to address over 30 different cancers. As a result, if you had extrapolated the death rate from cancer in 1990 and look at what has actually happened as of 2017, there are approximately 2.9 million cancer deaths that have been averted in this 27-year period. So we've made progress. But despite the success, we still have a long way to go. There are many different tumor types that we've made no progress, and pancreas cancer is a classic example where since 1975, the 5-year survival rate has remained flat at an abysmal 10%. And the global cancer outlook is grim. A projection from 2012 to 2030 is that there will be a 50% increase in worldwide cancer cases and a 60% increase in worldwide cancer deaths. This is largely driven by the increasing size of the population, particularly in developing countries, and the aging of that population. But it is also influenced by lifestyle choices. When we talked about lung cancer, we saw a clear reduction in smoking in the US between 1980 and 2012. There were 13.9 million less smokers, in stark contrast to China, where in the same period, there were almost 100 million more smokers. So how are we going to deal with this problem? 3 pillars of cancer therapy were in place through the advent of chemotherapy in the mid-1900s. But there were no advances for the 50 years after the introduction of chemotherapy until the advent of targeted therapies in the year 2000, and more recently, some of the progress that's been made with immunotherapy, where the question was really raised, what if the solution for cancer already lies within us. How can we harness the power of the immune system to fight cancer? And this was led to the development of approaches which unleash the T cells. And this is a video that was put together by the people at the University of Cambridge. And this red motion is a T cell that's migrating through its microenvironment, looking for a foreign object, finding a cancer cell, and attacking and killing this cancer cell. The good news is that 1 teaspoon of our blood has 5 million of these T cells. And so this is happening all the time as those T cells eliminate those microscopic cancers in our system. This led to the tremendous revolution in immunotherapy with the development of checkpoint inhibitors that led to doubling of survival rates in cancer, in lung cancer and melanoma. It led in 2018 to the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine for Jim Allison and Professor Hanjo, and over 1,500 clinical trials underway in 2020. Yet every revolution plants the seed for a new revolution, and despite hundreds of thousands of patients across a number of tumor types who have benefited from from checkpoint inhibitors, in those same tumor types, the vast majority of patients don't benefit, as shown by the gray bars, and there are other tumors that don't benefit at all from checkpoint inhibitor therapy, such that if you integrate all of this in the numbers of patients that respond, a 2019 study showed that only 13% of US cancer patients are eligible to receive and benefit from checkpoint inhibitor therapy. So there's been a lot of focus on why is this and how can we address this problem? And what's been learned is that unleashing the T cells alone is not enough. There is also an immune suppressive microenvironment around the tumor that will inhibit the ability of those T cells. As a result of the inactivation of those T cells, the tumor cells don't express PD-L1 to blunt that, and so these are characterized as cold tumors that have low levels of PD-L1 expression. A lot of work has gone into understanding how do we reduce this microenvironment. There's an analogy that's been used. The tumor cell is like a castle, and if the T cells are like the soldiers that you're mounting to fight an attack on the castle, the first generation of IO was focused on increasing the number of soldiers and making them bigger and stronger. And yet it really doesn't matter how many there are or how big and strong they are if there's a moat that they can't get across. And so how do we drain the moat to now allow for a strong assault on the tumor? And some research has been done to show that macrophages can play a good role and a bad role. The M2-like macrophages are pro-tumor. They suppress an immune response, but they can be reprogrammed to be anti-tumor. And one of the key signaling mechanisms is PI3 kinase gamma, such that if you inhibit PI3 kinase gamma, you relieve the macrophage suppression, you expand the T cells, you generate an immune response, and then the body does its natural thing to make sure that the immune response isn't hyperactive. It mounts a checkpoint and a PD-L1 upregulation, which is directly the target of the checkpoint inhibitors, and so the checkpoint inhibitors can address that. So a lot of the field has been focused on how do we turn cold tumors hot. I'm going to share some evidence, growing evidence, that this inhibition of PI3 kinase gamma does that. These are patients that were treated after one 30-day cycle with a PI3 kinase gamma inhibitor, and you can see in the vast majority of patients a reduction in those suppressive macrophages and a corresponding increase in the activated T cells in those patients. And as a result of that activation, you see an upregulation in the checkpoint PD-L1, in essence, priming for checkpoint inhibition. So what's that mean for a patient? This shows a melanoma patient who is on a checkpoint inhibitor, and you can see in the histology on the left, it looks a little bit like the cartoon I showed you earlier, where the yellow dots are T cells. So there are T cells there, but they're drowning in a sea of these purple macrophages. So it's not surprising that even being given a checkpoint inhibitor to activate those T cells, the patient's progressing. When you inhibit the macrophage, you reprogram the macrophages, you reduce the suppressive microenvironment, you increase the T cells, you show gamma interferon activated immune response. And what does that do for the patient? Well, with this melanoma patient, they were progressing on a checkpoint inhibitor with extensive new liver and lung mets. And when you add this PI3 kinase gamma inhibitor, you see a 40% reduction in the tumor volume for this patient. So the good news is there's a tremendous opportunity to build on and take immuno-oncology to the next level. Activating T cells alone is not enough. The next generation of therapies have to reduce immune suppression in the tumor microenvironment to both activate and sustain a robust immune response. What's really great is that there are biomarkers that can identify those patients with immune suppression in the tumor microenvironment. PD-L1 status is one of the best studied to date, and when patients have low levels of PD-L1, it's considered a cold tumor. It doesn't activate an immune response and doesn't respond to checkpoint inhibitors. A quick evidence of this is in bladder cancer patients. Here, across a number of different, 4 different checkpoint inhibitors, when they have high levels of PD-L1 expression in purple, they have a reasonable response rate. But if they have low levels of PD-L1 expression, they have a much lower response rate. And even more importantly, that translates to an overall survival, which is half as long in patients with low levels of PD-L1 expression. So I'm happy to say that my colleagues and I at Infinity are working to address this problem with a drug that's designed to solve the problem I just highlighted of reducing the immune suppression in the microenvironment to increase the activity of checkpoint inhibitors, particularly in those patients in greatest need who have low levels of PD-L1 expression. So as we look to the incredible advances that have been made in over the last 20 years, and building on the targeted therapies, immunotherapy, there is reason for great hope with the continuation of that with the development of vaccines, gene editing, and gene therapy, such that we all can commit to, despite the fact that cancer is a hard, complex evolutionary problem, we can leverage the unequivocal progress we've made to date to continue to make progress and achieve a cure, such that we commit ourselves to daring believe and finding a cure for all patients. Thank you.